Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Good afternoon. I'm Russell Rucker. I'd like to welcome you back to the Festival of Storytellers and thank Reader's Magnet for giving me the opportunity to talk here. I am the author of Textualism and Originalism in Our Constitutional Republic. And there's a poster above my head depicting that book. And I'm also the author of Our Founders in Their Words and Why They Matter. And there's a picture to my left depicting that. Now, my books are primarily about the Constitution, about the founding of our country, and that historical period. Yesterday, we were talking about the battles of Lexington and Concord and how the whole conflict began. And a couple of things that I didn't mention. Gary, who was later governor of Massachusetts, and he's meeting with some colonels at the Menominee Tavern. And when the troops came by, they actually had to go hide. They had to go hide in the cornfield while the British searched the hotel there. And this becomes important things sometimes because we got to try to defend ourselves as a republic. And it just shows you what is necessary. And that whole battle begins the conflict, and it shows how the Minutemen were coming down and they were firing against the soldiers, surrounded Boston and everything we discussed. And I think that's one of the reasons why our Second Amendment is so important, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I think I'll just read it to you quick. The Second Amendment: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And that's an interesting statement. A lot of people think it goes to like personal self-defense, carrying a concealed weapon, all these kind of things, but it's really not what it's about. It's not about hunting. It's about the self-defense of our nation. Okay, so it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Well, what is a well-regulated militia? Well, I think the answer, the best I've been able to find, is in the Articles of Confederation, which was our first Constitution. And in Article 6, it discusses defense, and it says, nor shall any body of forces be kept by any state in time of peace, except such manner only as in the judgment of the United States in Congress assembled. So it's telling them they cannot keep an army during a time of peace. It shall be deemed requisite to garrison the forts necessary to the defense of such states. But every state shall always keep a well-regulated and disciplined militia, sufficiently armed and accounted, and shall provide and constantly have ready for use in public stores a due number of field pieces and tents, and a proper quantity of arms, ammunition, and camp equipment. Now, the fact that it says shall in the Articles of Confederation leads you to believe that they must do these things and they must have ready to sufficiently defend the colony we're talking about. And the Articles of Confederation was a loose document, and it wasn't a strong, powerful constitution, and that's why we had the meeting to begin with to change this. Now, the Second Amendment was one of the first in the Bill of Rights. It's part of the Bill of Rights. It's part of the 10 Bill of Rights. There were 12 actually sent to the states. The whole purpose, the whole genesis of this, I guess you could say, was after the Constitution was worked on in the convention, it went to the ratifying states, and the states had to decide whether to accept the Constitution or not. And there were some complaints, primarily that we didn't have a Bill of Rights. And during the running to go to the first Congress, there was an election between James Madison, who's the father of our Constitution, and James Monroe. And James Madison promised, if elected, he would submit a Bill of Rights under Article 5 of our Constitution for an amendment setup. And his idea was to actually insert it all over the place, not as Amendment 1, 2, and 3. But he worked in the first Congress to get this approved. So he went through a grueling process to get the Articles of Confederation, to get the Bill of Rights through. Now, this is my book, Our Founders and Why They Matter. And in this book, I have here an original draft of the Bill of Rights that came out of the House, not the version that came out of the Senate. And I just want to read Article 5 of this to you, so it gives you a little better idea of what they were talking about. Article 5, a well-regulated militia composed of the people, being the best security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And this is where it gets really interesting. But no one religiously scrupulous of bearing arms shall be compelled to render military service in person. So it's just interesting, the language there, and it gives you an idea. See, the Second Amendment, the two sentences there in the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, that's kind of a statement of why we are doing this. Okay, it gives you an idea of the purpose for it. This is for national defense. And so if a conflict were to arise and we were being invaded somehow, parachutes of enemies coming in or what have you, and the militia were called up, you could go out of your house with your weapons, or if need be, go to the militia building and get weapons to help fight the conflict. That's what it was for. Now, our founders understood the militia system well because they really operated under it for a lot of the time when the revolution was going on. You know, in the very beginning to get things accomplished. And so they were really trying to be sure that The states did not have the power to have a standing army or navy, but they did have a power to defend themselves in case of invasion or Indian attack in those days. So the whole idea was to have these stores. A lot of people think that the militia must be a national guard unit or an army reserve, but that's just not the case, because those sections, those units are controlled by the federal government, not by the states. And I think that's important for you to understand. And it talks about the rights of the people. It doesn't talk about the rights of the government. So the whole idea here is to give people the power to help defend themselves. And considering what we went through to get independence and the tyranny that we had, especially up in the Boston area, it was important to try to fight back. But we also had like the siege of Charleston, and actually two of those, and actually Philadelphia invaded at one point. So they were trying to defend the country, and this is really a national defense amendment. And I think it's misunderstood by a lot of folks. I don't deny that you have a right to hunt, or that you should be able to defend yourself, get a concealed carry if you want. It doesn't matter to me. But that is, I think, protected under the Ninth Amendment. And the Ninth Amendment, just so you get a clear picture, states, Amendment 9, the enumeration of in the Constitution, in other words, the numbering in the Constitution of the amendments of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So they're talking about rights there that aren't spelled out specifically. And there's lots of them, but certainly self-defense is one. And a lot of people don't understand the concept of it, but we're talking about natural rights and natural law here. Okay, so you have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to move between states. You have a right to go to college if you want to, if you can afford it. I mean, you have the right to leave your property, people. All those kind of things fall under the Ninth. Okay, so I'm not denying people have a right to protect themselves. But when you're talking about the Second Amendment, you're clearly talking about a national defense situation. And I think that's really what's important to understand here. Now, a lot of our fellow citizens talk about the arms race. Okay, here's a shotgun. It's a double-barrel shotgun. It houses two barrels, so you can fire twice. Now, our founders could only fire once. And there's no doubt that we have more powerful weapons today than we used to have. But the whole idea here is to try to defend the country. It's not trying to defend against deer or something of that nature. Now, I have a cannon here. It's like almost a toy cannon. But they were allowed to have cannons in those days if they could afford it. This is a black powdered pistol, okay? And it houses basically a ball like this. It's a very small ball. This one's a little too big for the gun I have here. But the whole idea here is they could actually manufacture it themselves. But in order to load it, you have to take out this stopper here. You would have to pour in gunpowder through here, and you jam it down with this once you put your pad in and the bullet in. So you put the bullet in and you jam it all back down there so that it would be loaded. And then by firing one shot, it would come down and strike the black powder, and it would fire around. So this is all they had. But the truth of the matter is, this was a military grade weapon at the time of our founding. And it's just that the arms race has got better. And I don't deny there are problems with laws being broken and people doing bad things with guns. And I understand that. But we should never give up our rights because other people don't want to obey law. Now, I'm going to stop there for a moment, and I'm going to go to some of these questions here. And this is kind of a controversial amendment today because a lot of people are more worried about security than they are liberty. Kathy, I love history and how it affects our present lives. And well, there's a lot of things in our Constitution, especially the beginning, that were for a specific purpose of things that happened during the Revolution or leading up to it, because we really had problem with Britain and we were trying to deal with it. So there's a lot of historical aspects, and that's why I think the history of it is important to understand any of these amendments or any of the other parts, because we need to know exactly what they were trying to determine in order to understand what the Constitution means. And that's really the reason I've written these books. Sarah, when did you decide to write the book and why? Well, I wrote my first book primarily because I was just almost to the point of livid over things that were being written in the paper and things that were on television shows and discussions telling people that things were in there that just weren't in the Constitution. And I guess I was really trying to correct the record. And this was probably about a year and a half ago. So I typed up a couple of pages, then I started going through the Constitution line by line, paragraph by paragraph, explaining it. And I would think about it for whatever amendment it was. I would think about it real hard for a few minutes, probably a good day before I'd write that section up. So it took me a while to write up the explanation because I was really trying to get to the crux of the matter and really understand. And it's sometimes when you give yourself enough time to analyze it, you get to a better understanding of it. And I just think it's important for people to know it. Who is your favorite founding father? Wow. Well, I'm really partial to Hamilton, but I would have to pick Washington because of how he ran the country to begin with. But there are a number of them I have a great respect for. I've been out to James Madison's home, for instance, and Jefferson's home, and I really love what James Madison was actually able to get to us as father of the Constitution, and the Constitution's vitally important to me. But Hamilton was kind of the leader of the Federalists, and I think I agree more with the Federalists than with the Jeffersonian Republicans. So I really like Hamilton, especially some of the plans he had. We're heavily in debt in this country. Hamilton had a plan to pay only 3% off a year. If we were able to get to a point where we weren't spending more than we took in and pay back 3%, it might take 50 years, but we'd be out of debt. So I really like the whole concept that he had. And it's an important question, and I really thank you for that because there are so many founding fathers. I've actually identified 134 that I've been working on and writing up bios on. First, taking all the signers of the Articles of Confederation, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and then I've added people that I thought of were important. Because some people think there's about 6 founding fathers, and others take a wider view. And I take a much wider view because there's so many that gave almost everything they had. Like Robert Morris virtually went bankrupt. In fact, he spent time in debtor's prison trying to help finance the conflict. And I mean, there's lots of different people there that did an awful lot. Samuel Adams worked real hard and getting basically causing trouble enough to get a war going to begin with. So I mean, most of our founding fathers, a great majority anyway, probably 99% of them, I have a deep respect for. I really do, because they gave all. You know, they sacrificed their names, their wealth, and their sacred honor, as they put it in the Declaration. Robert, interpretations of the Ninth Amendment have evolved over time, influenced by changing social norms and legal doctrines. Okay, well, that may be true. And there's a lot of interpretations that have changed over time of many of these things. I find lots of people talking about the second, for instance, saying that it's all about just personal self-defense. But I think otherwise. And the interpretations of things may change, but the interpretation at the time of the document itself don't ever change. We have, like, the Federalist Papers, we have the Anti-Federalist Papers to fall back on. We have the letters between Jefferson and Madison, the letters between Jefferson and Adams, and a lot of other documentation that we can fall back on and look and try to decide what exactly it means. And I think it means what it meant when it was first written. Now, as far as the ninth goes, and the 10th says if it's not here, it belongs to the states. And I agree with that most of the time. But when you start talking about some of these other things that aren't clearly defined, obviously there was something they were talking about. And I think this goes back to the 9th. It goes to natural law or rights given to you by God or man's nature, that kind of the natural things that you would just do. Like you have a right to get up in the morning, get on your horse, and leave your farm if you chose to do so. I mean, so you have rights just to mingle and live life the way you want to live it. And I think that pretty well encompasses most of our 9th. So I guess that's the best I can do. I'm glad to see you back today. I've enjoyed your questions. So thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. Pauline, what is your ultimate goal as a writer and political historian? My ultimate goal is to teach people what the Constitution means, the government we're supposed to have. And that's what I'm doing. That's why I do motivational speaking. That's why I have a YouTube channel. I dump a video every week, and I'm trying to just further explain and understand things. And honestly, I spend time researching things every day. I was researching some Federalist Papers today because I came into a debate on my own Friends of Textualism and Originalism Facebook group this morning, and somebody was bringing something up, and so I had to go look it up and do research on it right away in order to respond. And I do a lot of research every day. I love history, but primarily where I at is just trying to teach people what it's supposed to mean and try to get back to a constitutional government that we were supposed to have. And thank you for your question, Pauline. Betty, what advice can you give young political historians when writing a book? Well, I think the first thing you have to do when you're writing a book on history is you have to research the topic. And I just start working from that. I take a lot of notes and try to find a lot of different angles of exactly where it took place. Now, our founders, in their words, I actually use quotations by our founders to explain a lot of things. And really, in order to write any book on anything, you have to understand the material we're talking about. And I think that's the first important thing to do is research enough so you know what you're talking about. Write what you know. If you're doing history, study it. Now, I have a third book, The Reader's Magnet, it's actually working on now. It's called 126 Days in Philadelphia. And Philad is the old word for Philadelphia. And in that book, I've tried to bring the conventional eye and show exactly what's happening. And it is a historical fiction book, where these two books are nonfiction. But I'm trying to bring that convention to life. The same as here, I'm trying to explain a lot of different aspects of our Constitution. So I work real hard trying to get those things taken care of. But we still have a couple of questions here. Jeanette says, what can you say about America's arms industry? Well, right now we've been sending so much stuff overseas. I wonder if we're going to be depleted at some point. I'm not sure if we're making enough. But we have to have enough arms to defend ourselves and, just to keep our stockpiles up. And sometimes, if just like anything else, weaponry we've produced may not be very good. It might go bad over time. It's important to have a strong supply of equipment and arms to defend ourselves. Over history, we've gotten ourselves in trouble anytime we've let our guard down, anytime we've weakened our defenses, and that can be an issue. So I guess that's the best I can answer that question. Is I just hope we're keeping up. Riley, do you think less of the American population are interested in studying the amendments? Yeah, I don't think a lot of people care about it, to be honest. It's a small core group of people that are studying it and working on it and actually care about it. But it's darn important. We have 4 amendments out there right now that have not been ratified. 33 were sent to the states. One is actually part of the original Bill of Rights, and that has to do with the size of Congress and the number of seats that are allowed. We have a pro-slavery one from the 1850s, because you see, the first 100 years or so, we didn't put a timeline on the end. So now we put maybe 7 years to ratify or 10, but we didn't do that way back. There's one from the 1920s, I believe it is, that has to do with child labor that was meant to. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Well, my time is slowly coming to an end. I'd like to mention my website, russelljrucker.com, and there you can get a book actually signed. There's even a place there to type in exactly how you want me to sign it, and I'd gladly send you a copy. These books are important. They're timeless. They're not political. They're historical. There are people that make that mistake. Unless you're talking of politics of the 17th century, they aren't political. But they're timeless because you're talking about history and you're going through explanations. So they're important books to have. And I have done my level best to make it understandable It's not written so it's too complicated. It's written for the average man to really understand the situation. Now, we'll be saying goodbye today in a minute here, but I do want to bring up what we have on tap for tomorrow. And tomorrow we're going to discuss the First Amendment, and there's a lot to unpack in the First Amendment. So I just thought I'd bring that up to you. And please come back tomorrow and listen to more of what I have to say. You have a great day. Goodbye for now. Have a good afternoon.